Hi, I am Mark Dombeck, a licensed psychologist and cognitive behavior therapist. I have a private practice based in Oakland, California, where I work primarily with adults and adolescents on a number of different problems, including depression and anxiety. And one of the problems I deal with on a regular basis is anger, problem anger, and what we call anger management, which is one of the ways to help people with problem anger. I assume that you are participating today because somebody you care about, or perhaps yourself, has an anger problem. Well, that's not good, but neither is that really bad, because if you have an anger problem, learning about how you can help to manage that anger problem is really the first step. And not everybody leaps into psychotherapy or goes to see the physician, the doctor, about this in one form or another. A lot of people will just sort of take their time, most of the time thinking they can manage it themselves. And sometimes they can, and that's good when they can. And sometimes it's not enough. And something like psychotherapy can really be a help. So the information that I'm going to be presenting today will hopefully help people along in their own self-help efforts, or be useful to them as they pick up a psychotherapy with a therapist. Okay, well, let's get started. I'm going to turn on a screen share, and I will now sort of go over the presentation aspect of this. So anger and aggression is my topic today. Basically, we're not really going to get too deep into this today. We're just going to sort of set the foundation. We're going to make a basic preparation for understanding anger and aggression. And most specifically, and I'll really highlight this when I get to that slide, we're going to really differentiate anger and emotion from aggression, which is a behavior. The most common thing in the world for people with problem anger is to think that these things are fused at the hip, that they are one and the same. When you become angry, you must become aggressive, violent, and get into a fight or raise your voice or verbal in one form or another. That's very natural, but it is not necessary, because these are separable things. The other information on the screen right now is how to contact me. So I do maintain a practice website at agiletherapist.com. You can reach me via email at agiletherapist.com, mark@agiletherapist.com. And in the United States, you can contact me by telephone at 510-900-5123. So, any talk about problem anger starts with anger, right? We said anger is an emotion, and we should talk about what that is in a little bit of detail. Again, not getting too deep because we don't want to bog down here. But basically, anger is one of the complement of biologically given emotions. It's genetically programmed into human beings and many other animals, who might express it as rage or aggression in one form or another, but basically it's there. And it's not something that you learn, it's something you're prepared to do based on how you've been constructed, how you're built. And it's one of what are considered to be basic emotions. And I'm using basic in the sense of meaning exactly this. It's prepared genetically, temperamentally, and you don't have to learn how to be angry. It's just something you're able to do as you come into the world. Other basic emotions include fear, or the capacity to be happy, and things like disgust. And all of these emotions are thought to be there because they give us ways, in the absence of our ability to think about things carefully and rationally, which came much later when you consider the evolution of the brain. These emotions motivate us to be able to survive better. They allow us to orient to threats or dangers, or to respond to the environment in one form or another, which if we didn't have the ability to do this without learning it, it would be much more difficult for us to pay attention and to respond and to understand what's happening. And because of that, we would be in a lot more actual danger, because we wouldn't notice when a threat came along or when things were getting stressful, and we wouldn't know to respond. So anger is useful. Anger is a tool. Anger is there for a reason. Anger helps you to be responsive to the environment and to address the environment. Specifically, when the environment seems threatening, anger is one of the ways that you are prepared to meet that threat. Anger helps us to recognize that a threat exists. It helps us to orient towards the source of the threat, and it helps us to address the threat. And in doing those things, it's very much like another basic and universal emotion, which we call fear or anxiety. So at the bottom of the stack, at the very base of all of this, we have anger, a basic universal emotion which is normal and useful. Some of the things that anger helps us to be able to do, again, is to notice, to orient, and to address. We can now recognize when ourselves or other people that we're invested in are being threatened or being taken advantage of. We notice it because it burns us, it bothers us, we get angry. And we're able to take action because of that anger and how it mobilizes us physically and mentally and emotionally and behaviorally. We're able to defend ourselves or to protect ourselves or to protect other people we care about. Now, we're also able to use anger to help socialize people. So for instance, imagine you're a parent, or if you are a parent, this will be something you understand implicitly, I think. Kids do dangerous stuff. And when that happens, sometimes parents get angry. Now, parents can certainly use that anger in ways that are very unproductive, but the fact that parents get angry is able, in some sense, to punish the child. It's an aversive, uncomfortable experience for the child who's receiving the anger, who is now the target of the anger. And in some sense, the possibility is there, although there may be better, more refined ways to make this happen, to teach the child not to repeat the dangerous behavior so as to avoid the aversive, angry response. So that's one way that anger can be useful, although there is also capacity there for anger to be not useful and even abusive. Going with this same idea of anger as a tool for helping to teach or control other people's behavior, anger is sometimes useful for keeping other people in line. And this might be one of the ways that anger benefits you if you are someone with problematic anger. It's a short-term benefit, though. Over time, this tends to be something which is far outweighed by the negative side of anger. So although in the short term you can keep people in line, you can control their behavior and compel their behavior to some extent, over the longer course there are negative consequences associated with anger which tend to outweigh it. But just because that's true, we don't want to say that there aren't also benefits from expressing anger. This is really the most important slide, the most important point that I want to make in this very first presentation on anger. We often express anger through aggression, but anger is an emotion and aggression is a behavior. So we fight, we raise our voice, we clench our fist, our body gets tight, and people notice our aggressive posture. We may not notice that these are separate things. It often seems like you get angry and you express that through aggression. It seems like these are fused things, like they have a single identity, but they're not the same thing. Anger is an emotion that you feel, and which motivates you. Aggression is a behavior that you act out. It is very possible to learn how to be angry without acting aggressively. And because many people with problematic anger truly do not understand this at the beginning, I want to sort of put this out there as a liberating truth. It is not necessary to act aggressively to still be angry and respect that anger and have that anger. It can seem like aggression is inevitable, but it really isn't the case. Anger and aggression can be separated, and that is a beautiful thing. That's freedom. So, people with problem anger often are people who become angry and act aggressively all at once, in a unitary manner, all as one sort of fused process. But not everybody becomes aggressive when they're angry. So there are individual differences in how people express anger and how anger is acted out or not acted out. And there are different things that influence whether that's going to happen. So one of the things, and there are many of them, I'm just sort of highlighting a few for you to think about. One of the reasons that some people don't act out aggressively is because in addition to the anger that they feel, they also may feel very fearful, very anxious, very worried. And the fear may interact with the anger and sort of cancel it out. So when we're confronted with something dangerous, we can freeze, we can flee, or we can fight. So fear is the freezing and the fleeing, as is anxiety, which is the anticipation of the fearful event, and anger is the fighting. But if we're experiencing all of these emotions at once, they're going to interact, and they may keep you from acting out aggressively, from fighting. Another way that people are different is that they are born and have experiences which cause them to vary in terms of how impulsive they are. Now, impulsiveness means you see something and you immediately reach for it. There's very little space between the representation of something in your mind and the acting out of that thing. That's what impulsiveness means. It means you can't stop yourself, or you don't stop yourself, or it's very difficult to stop yourself. Some people are way more impulsive than others, just by how they were built, how they were born. And some people like to drink or to take Valium or things of that nature, what we call depressive drugs. And when we're under the influence of those substances, that sort of puts our guard down, and we become more impulsive than we normally would be. So it should not be a shocker that if the characteristic of impulsiveness is associated with acting out of anger and aggression, that if we have a drink, we're more likely to act out and become aggressive than we normally would be. But the point here is really that people are different, and not everybody is as impulsive as everybody else. And that's one of the reasons why people vary in terms of anger. Another way has to do with how you have been socialized, what your ethical beliefs are. So I've written out one here on the slide, thou shalt not kill. This is a religious commandment, right? People who really take this to heart, people who are very, very thoughtful about right and wrong behavior, are less likely to act out very aggressively than people who are a little bit looser with it. Even if they believe it just about the same, if they're not people who get bound up in ethical dilemmas and see things as very right or very wrong, then anger is going to be affected by how those beliefs sort of play out in your mind. A final point that I want to make here has to do with judgment and blame. If anger is accompanied, as it frequently is, with a kind of judgment about the object of your anger, let's say you're angry at another person and you're angry with them in your mind, there's a thought that says, I'm not responsible for this anger that I have because this other person did something wrong. I was provoked. She provoked me. If there is a judgment and a blame that is fueling your anger and present in your anger, you're more likely to feel a license to act out. You're less likely to inhibit your aggression. If you don't have that, you're more likely to be able to hold on to your temper. And although you might become very angry, you might not finally explode into violence. So people are different, and they're influenced by not only how they're built, but also the experiences that they've had, how they've been socialized, and even something as simple as whether they've had a drink or two on the day when they become angry. This slide kind of summarizes the points we were just making. People vary widely in terms of how quickly they become angry and how they express anger and how willing they are to go there, to become violent, to explode in aggression. We see less aggression when fear is greater than anger or present enough to really influence anger and kind of inhibit it. When impulsiveness is low and cautiousness is high, that's a kind of temperamental variable. And of course, it's influenced by things like drugs and alcohol. And when strongly held ethical beliefs that violence is wrong are present, people are less likely to be aggressive. However, if these things are not present, if anger is louder than fear, if anger is louder than belief, if anger is overpowering cautiousness, then we're going to explode. We're going to attack. When anger is expressed habitually and automatically and without adequate deliberation or reflection, serious problems can occur for the angry person and for the other people in their lives. What kind of problems? Lots of avoidable problems, unfortunately. Anger tends to be something that we can find very useful in the short term. It compels other people's behavior. People become afraid of us and they back down and they do what we want. But that's a very short-term kind of thing. That's a very in-the-moment victory. If you think about the process of being in a war, that's just one battle. And over time, as the war progresses, lots of very negative things tend to happen to people who cannot bring their anger under control. One of them is an increased prevalence of serious medical problems. Among them, heart disease, things of that nature. Heart disease, nobody wants that. Hypertension is part of it. Problems with insomnia, headache problems from tension, and even GI problems, digestion problems. Other kinds of what we would call mental problems or emotional problems, problems with anxiety and depression. Relationship problems, this one is huge. It's very hard to be in a relationship with someone who's chronically angry. And over time, even if your partner is not the direct brunt of your anger, it tends to degrade relationships, make them harder. It tends to destroy intimacy. It tends to make people more isolated and lonely, and it tends to cause people to withdraw, and it's just very bad for relationships. And because of our nature as beings that really need to be in relationships, for most of us, we really need to be in relationships to be as healthy as possible. We are social creatures. We need and crave intimacy. When we're not able to do that because of something like chronic anger, it's very bad for us in the long term. It's not just our personal relationships which suffer. Our work relationships also can suffer greatly. If we are expressing anger in the workplace, or even not quite expressing it, but if it's somehow leaking out into our behavior in the workplace and influencing our work product, that can cause a great deal of trouble and can lead to employment problems. And of course, when most people don't have a job or are having trouble finding a job or keeping a job, that leads to tremendous economic stress, which feeds into relationship problems and can also feed into medical problems, because when you don't have enough money, everything is more stressful. Finally, and this is a big one, this is sometimes the pathway through which people enter into something like anger management therapy. If you have a problem with anger, and if you are prone to violence and fighting, you can get into very serious legal problems. And these can drag on for ages, drain your money. It can even lead to incarceration. And of course, if you're incarcerated, that leads to economic stress, isolation, loneliness, etc. This is a very bad combination of problems to inflict upon yourself to the extent that you have the ability to make a change or control it. This is something you want to avoid. These are bad problems. So if the problems are so bad with regard to problem anger, why do we do it? Why do we do it? Well, I hope that it's clear why we do it, because we are built to respond to short-term contingencies. We respond to immediate rewards, not rewards that are off in the future or punishments that are off in the future. We respond to things that are happening now, in the short term, the immediate present. And in the short term, aggression is compelling. It feels good. It's rewarding. And it even often works. It gets you what you want. You feel powerful. You feel alive and aroused. You might even feel free, because you might have been inhibiting yourself because of some of those ethical commandments we talked about. And when you go to that angry place, you suddenly feel free of those ethical shackles. That feels very liberating, very good. And you might find that the act of being aggressive feels even joyful and meaningful in a way that has to do with your ability to express a part of yourself that you've kept under wraps because it's been something that seems dangerous, and perhaps it even is dangerous. All of those feelings are very powerful reinforcers of your behavior, and they're present in the short term. And not only is it something that feels good for you, you often do, in the short term, manage to turn other people's behavior into the shape that you want it to be. You get results. In this sense, being aggressive, allowing your anger to explode into violence, is addictive. And just like it's hard to stop smoking cigarettes, or to stop drinking, or to do any of the number of things in this world that are hard to do because they have an addictive quality, anger is like that as well. But it doesn't have to be that way. You can learn anger management skills, and anger management skills can help you to cope more effectively with your problem anger. Anger management is learned. While anger itself, the emotion, is not learned. It's something you're born with. How you express that anger as aggression, as violence, in destructive ways, is something you learned. And you can also learn more effective ways to cope with your problem anger. Anger management is about understanding how your anger works, how your aggression works, understanding when you're angry, and most people don't understand that they are angry until they're just about at the point where they're about to explode. And finally, learning how to avoid anger explosions. All of these things can help you put yourself under better self-control and free yourself from some of these really negative problems, or at least make them a little bit better. This is a good thing. This is a hard thing because anger is so compelling. Violent anger feels so good in the moment. But it is very possible. I've seen a number of people do it. And you can do it too. This is probably a good stopping place for now. So I think we'll end this class, and we'll pick up in a week, I think, with the next piece. Thank you so much for viewing this. Once again, I'm Mark Dombeck. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist in private practice in Oakland, California, and we're talking about anger management. See you soon.